Everybody, thanks for watching. Just a quick reminder, books are still being shipped out. We didn't forget anybody. We're going to be sending you guys tracking numbers for anybody who ordered books. But we got you guys as always, and I appreciate the patience and support. Also, yeah, a lot of you guys hit me up about the Never Pay Again sale. I know a lot of people missed it, the 24-hour sale. Put it back up there, and I actually reduced the price. It's 24 hours only. Make sure you guys take advantage of this. It will not happen again. I understand a lot of people going through stuff and dealing with issues. This is a lot of information. It's a lot of work, years of work for you guys have been following me to put it out for this price. But I understand, people dealing with issues, and take advantage of it while it's at this price. It won't happen again. 24 hours. I'll leave it up probably a little bit longer, but you guys have to at least Sunday to take advantage of that sale. And yeah, it'll get you access. And if you are doing the $7.99 a month, that will cancel it out. You get one payment right here. You got a shot to knock it all out and be done. I mean, I can't make it any easier than this. Lifetime membership, access, the whole nine. You'll get the download link. I can't make it any easier than this. So you want to take advantage of it, take advantage of it. It's not going to happen again, ever again at this price. And I got a lot of the emails. I understand people dealing with issues. This has never been about money. So this is why I do this for you guys. So don't insult me. Take advantage of it while it's available. So appreciate the support. So now I want to get into this video. We're still in Saturn retrograde until October, and it's a lot happening if you guys are keeping up with Saturn and keeping up what's going on out there, based on, what we can measure and what, if you're into astrology. But it's going to be a Saturn Satan Part 7. It's going to be on Merkaba Academy. If you are a lifetime member or Never Pay Again member, it will be out this week. But there's so much going on with Saturn, so much new information and really old information. So we're going to get into a Saturn Satan Part 7 that we're going to put out on Merkaba Academy. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, we're still in retrograde with Saturn. And I talked about before how, this is karma season. If you doing any shit bad, if you got any bad intentions, now it's not the time. Now it's not the time to be doing anything stupid, because this is karma season. This is the time where you can get a lot done. This is where they have to make everything seem, evil. This is what it's about. Because if you understood the power of it, you wouldn't be scared of it. So, we got into my Saturn Satan series. And, 6 videos on that. It's a lot of information, but the connection with Saturn and Satan and understanding that, connection with Kronos and Osiris and how all this stuff goes together, it's important to understand, because a lot of people are not going to figure it out. So, for those of you, we talked about this, who had questions, you got to understand one. You have the Old Testament, you got the New Testament, right? So when you really understand, the Old Testament is the worship of Saturn. And I got into this in previous videos. It's the worship of Saturn. This is why we get into the whole Judaism and, the black robes. When you go back to Syriac Orthodox Christianity, remember, before Islam, they was wearing the black robes. It's what it's about. It represents Saturn. It's what the alchemists call the dark sun, which is Saturn. So we got into this information, and you got to understand that Old Testament, Saturn, New Testament, our sun. So Saturn was called the dark sun because it's believed to have been a sun or something like a sun, either a dwarf sun. It goes back so far. And remember, I talked about how Earth used to be, Velikovsky and a lot of other researchers believe that Earth used to be a satellite of Saturn. And the planet Titan is like Earth. And talked about the whole moons of Saturn and how it can't be a coincidence that Iapetus looks just like the Death Star which is the moon in Star Wars. And then we get into that whole, situation with Star Wars and Jedi and how it relates to Osiris, which we'll talk about in a second. But you need to understand that how this is all in big relationship to each other. And it's not a coincidence, and so much has happened now. It's fitting for what's to come to be happening around now, since we are in retrograde with Saturn. And I mean, it's financial shit, banking stuff in your life, stuff that's going to come back on you. If you're having karmic issues, this is now. This is because of now. So it would be a good thing for you to tie up any loose ends. I don't mean go whack nobody and nothing like that, but tie up any issues that could be coming back to you. We got into this with understanding astrology with the zodiac, and there are consequences. And this is one of the reasons why we've seen Saturn worship all over the world, but it's not as we recognize it, and that's the problem. We got to go back to how it was shown or how they seen it back then. So I showed you guys throughout the series so many ancient depictions of two suns. And a lot of people don't understand when you go back and look at all those ancient drawings, especially we found them in the Middle East, there's always two suns, and it's like, what is this other image? Looks like a star, and that's Saturn. So when we go back and we look at the worship from back then and what they was talking about, us now believing they're talking about our sun in the sky, they were always talking about Saturn. That was the business back then. That's what they were worshiping back then. And it's where we go and look in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is Saturn worship. Everybody who they're going and killing the Israelites, they're worshiping Saturn, Moloch, Saturn, Remphian, Saturn. This is all in the Bible, and it's giving you that understanding. So when he said, you shall worship no other gods. So think about it as we talk about us conscious people, the sun being God. What would be the other God? Saturn. 2, the other God. No gods before me. Understand? So you got to understand that breakdown on what it's speaking to. So you have the dark sun, Saturn, Satan, but it's trying to make this dualistic connection esoterically. So you have the dark Lord, Satan, the dark Lord, the dark sun. And then you have, Jesus is the light of the world, which we know is the sun. And understanding this connection is one of the reasons why they had the temptation between, Satan and Jesus in the Bible to kind of further give you understanding about what it's talking about. And this has to do with the, reptilian lower brain and all that, which we'll get into. But it's deep stuff. So, for the Christians who I just got finished talking to, we got into this, and, you guys are scared of Satan and you don't understand its connection. It's very esoteric. And it's why I tell Christians, you're doing yourself a disservice by not understanding this stuff. And same thing for a lot of conscious people that may be scared. I told you, the thing that broke me out finally out of Christianity was studying Satan, studying the scary stuff. And then you see, how it all fits and how, it applies to, all of this Satan stuff. But when we go back and we look at, the ancient world, and we see, Shamash, and we see that image, of Saturn. That's Saturn there. And a lot of people, again, we see a star, we automatically think sun. It's talking about Saturn. But you start going through the Old Testament and you look at, the worship of Moloch and everything that it's talking about, it's always going back to Saturn. It says, this is Acts 7:43. Yea, ye took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, figures which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. So you just got to break that down. And then we're talking about, star, your God, and then you have to look at what's being said, So I talked about this before. When you got to understand when it's saying, I am the Lord, your God, who is it talking to? And then he's saying, no, that's your God, Remphan. So what's going on here? So then when you look deeper, it's like, well, wait a minute. It seems as if the Jews is worshiping this same God. So is it, if you want to get deep into it, is it that you have a sect of Jews who over the years, because this is what they want you to believe, who over the years stuck with this belief, and they got distorted in Babylon. You have the Babylonian Talmud, and it got distorted. And we have this so-called worship that's supposed to be Judaism, but is really, satanic. It's something to kind of give you a distraction, a segue away from the truth. Because if you really get deep into Judaism, it's kind of split as well. And we have the mystic Jews, which is where, my name comes from. It's Merkaba, the real Merkaba, I call myself, when you understand what that's really about, which, we are the real Merkaba. We are the Merkaba, you understand. And it's trying to break away from this understanding to get you lost for a reason. So when you look at, Revelations, and it's saying, behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship at thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. And this is one of the things that have the black Hebrews thinking that, well, God is going to get the white man in the end, and y'all going to be worshiping at our feet. Y'all going to become slaves. It's one of the verses that does that. But see, they're confused as well, because they don't understand what this is esoterically, because you do yourself a disservice if you don't go dig into all this information. If you don't go look it up and research and see what it's talk about esoterically. So Saturn is known as the black square. We know the Jews wear the tefillin, which is a black square. They wear, on their foreheads. We know about the Kaaba in Mecca, where we have the Muslims walk around it. And then it's just understanding how that corresponds with the planet Saturn itself. When it's saying you took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphian, this is what it's talking about. And this is what they saw. So you go back to the image with Shamash, and then you see the star. This is what it's talking about. This is Saturn. This is what it's referring to. And you can go back and look, from the planet, from Earth. It's how they seen it back then. It's how it showed up. And we see the depiction in many different places. We don't know what changed to make it, the way that it is. But we know there's planetary movement, and sometimes movements, we don't see them for thousands of years. But this is what they saw back then. And this is where the worship went to for a reason. So everything in the ancient world is pointing, towards this area with, Saturn, Sirius. You go back and look through history traditionally, and we talk about thousands of years, hundreds of years, that when we get these planetary alignments, along with these retrogrades, and especially with Saturn, stuff usually happens. And we're seeing stuff now. We're going to get into, I don't want to even get into it, but say it here. But more stuff coming on what's happening. But this is stuff that when we see happen, we have major planetary events, as I talked about in our previous videos. Stuff happens with the world. Things change, major changes, big things. Going back to Saturn, Satan series, we got into understanding, Osiris, understanding the correspondence with Satan and how it, corresponds to us. And as I said, you have, the Dark Lord, you have the Lord, you have this, Old Testament God who many would consider evil. And it's trying to give you that understanding of this Dark Lord, the Black Sun, this evil, this dualistic God of Saturn, which is Satan. And then you have the Sun and God, and why everything is so crazy in the Old Testament and the New Testament as well, as far as why, God just simply don't destroy this dude. It's because it's him. It's part of you, part of us. And understanding that, and then understanding this two sun worship and why they're more gravitating towards the Saturn aspect is because it's dealing with material. And that's what this is all about. So I showed you guys in the video about, all of the corporations, the companies that manufacture stuff that we use, products, money, what have you, having the Saturn logo. We have those rockets that's going to Saturn, the Saturn V, same ones that went to Mars, Saturn rockets. And it's dealing with us. It has everything to do with us. It's a lot more to get into with Saturn, which I got into. But it's understanding this materialistic relationship we have with that planet and with these esoteric things like Satan and Osiris and what it all means. So talked about, Kundalini energy and understanding, opening the third eye, how all this goes together. It's not just a coincidence, the 666 relationship with Saturn and us is trying to give you that understanding of the representation of those numbers and how they correspond to us. So people think we worship Osiris. As I said, they think we chose Osiris and these Egyptian gods to worship over the biblical, prophets or what have you, and what all this stuff, means. It's not hard to break this stuff down and see it's all astrology. It's not hard to see it. So I got into Jesus representing the sun on the cross of the zodiac. It's there. People just want to ignore it. The 12 disciples that follow Jesus represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. Plain and simple. He's telling them to follow me. So you're following the sun. Plain and simple. And that's a hint right there. So what happens when we start following the movement? We start following the movement of the planets, the sun, which the signs of the zodiac will represent, of course, planetary bodies. So what is this? It's talking to everybody. It's Jesus saying to you, follow me. And the only way is going to be through me. I'm the way. So this is something that they've taken from the ancient world that we've seen. And it's esoteric in so many different ways. So the big connection, you had a lot of people coming out, and this is what people talking about lately with Osiris and Saturn. And then you just got to understand many different representations of Satan. And same thing with Osiris. I showed you guys how Osiris also represents the bull. And this is what we have with Moloch. You have the bull, then you have the bull calf, and we see this in so many different ancient civilizations. And then, it's not a coincidence that you had Satan being shown with the two horns. And then you also have Satan as a serpent. And it's like, what is going on? The dragon, that serpent, he's called a serpent, and a dragon. He's looked like Pan and a lot of different drawings with the horns. All this stuff is the same. So it all goes back to ancient Kemet and them giving us this understanding. And I talked about what George Lucas and Iapetus and him creating the Death Star, how he already knew this. You can clearly see that the lightsaber is representing the Jed pillar, which is Osiris. You can see the Death Star. So Iapetus is one of the moons of Saturn. You have Darth Vader's mask, which is, the Sphinx, which is what most people know it as. But I showed you guys, with the Tut bus and understanding what it represents. So talked about how you have Satan, that serpent, representing the lower part of the brain, which you got to understand is reptilian. The higher part of the brain would be the limbic system, which they call the bird brain, because it's just like a parrot. We share the same type of limbic system with birds, which is one of the reasons why parrots can talk. So you have here with the Wajet, Nekbet, you have the serpent, right? You have the bird. It's giving you Upper and Lower Egypt. For those who understand what that divide is really about, it's power. But we have what I showed you guys with Osiris. This is Osiris right here, represents the spine, and it's giving you that energy, the serpentine energy, the Kundalini energy, which basically rises from the spine. But this is all the same. This is what Osiris is. And when you see the early depictions of Osiris, you see him represents the spine and many other things. We don't worship him as a god. We represent him as many different aspects of us and nature. Now, as I said, Osiris represents the Jed, D-J-E-D. The energy rising up the spine activates the third eye. So you have Jed, which would be the spine, the Jed pillar eye, Jedi. And this is why George Lucas used this representation and where the word Jedi comes from. It's talking about the Jed. So as I've shown you guys with the pyramid in Kemet, the Great Pyramid is giving you this exact representation. You have the King's and Queen's Chamber pointing to Sirius and pointing to the lower chamber, which would be the Queen's Chamber, pointing to the constellation of Draco, which would be the serpent, which is why Queen, you have the woman Eve, which is why Eve is the one who dealt with the serpent first. It's just giving you this whole story. And this is stories that they're not telling us, that you don't hear about that you have to really dig into ancient Egyptian mythology and understand a lot of these stories. I talked about the whole story with the Garden of Hesperides and understanding that this is the Garden of Eden story that existed long before anything biblical. And in the Garden of Hesperides, you have multiple stories, with Hercules and, him having to do his duties. And he went to the Garden of Hesperides and he had to basically wipe out the serpent dragon. And it's one of the things you got to understand when you see that Garden of Hesperides and understanding that you had a man and a woman in the garden, which would have been Zeus, along with Hera. And we had the apples of immortality, which is the same as, the fruit that's going to make them immortal. That's the whole thing. If they eat off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life, they will live forever like us. It's the same thing. It's where the story is coming from. So that's an ancient story that goes back. It's many depictions in ancient Kemet where you can see this tree and this tree of knowledge. We know where it came from. So it's a lot of information that you're doing yourself a disservice of not understanding and running back to the understanding of this evil Satan. And it represents so many different things outside of your understanding. And it's going to take a lot of information for you to make it clear to understand it. So you got to really go back and start digging. And a lot of you guys are way behind. Satan is an aspect of us, just like God is. Good and evil. That's what it's about. So you have to break down the esoteric understanding of it. And of course, when you run into scary, spooky things, it's going to correspond to something that's bad. And this is what it's about. So yeah, you are correct in saying Satan, but this is stuff that when we look at scary stuff, it has to deal with men, stuff that men do. The magical, spooky stuff we see on TV is not real. It's still comes from the mind of men. So it's not something you should be caught up in. It's something that men created, just like they created the biblical stories for you to really grasp and understand that. The real Satan, evil, comes from men, comes from you. We have to be the people who instill it, who do it, who make it happen, no matter how you want to slice that. So anything evil you're seeing in this world is coming from men. It's not coming from, some angels or demons or something from out there. It's us. So it's not a coincidence. We see what's happening. It's the work of men. The wars, the financial problems, everything we've seen is the work of men. It's the evil within us. Plain and simple. We decide what happens. It's the work of men. Period. What you do, what happened in your life, you can't scapegoat it out to something, spooky like Satan. It's you. And you're giving that credit to the evil part of you, which would be the satanic part of you. So again, as I said, would kind of be appropriate to say, oh, the devil made me do it, because the devil is a part of you. It's that evil part of you. Always go back and talk about this. You have the, angel on one shoulder, devil on the other. It's the yin yang dualistic nature that we all live in. You make choices. And that's what the story in the Bible, Job is about. It's good and evil, God on one hand, Satan on the other hand. But, it's not good what God did. It's really all an act of Satan when you understand it. It's all the bad side, because the good part of you wouldn't put Job in that situation. It would be like, I'm not going to do this to prove a point to you. So it's giving you that understanding of how, your thoughts that you think is good could be evil, or what you think is good, is bad. We all have our interpretations of good and evil. If you're trying to do something that is important to you, somebody else might consider that bad. A group of people might consider that bad, and you're labeled the bad guy. But to you, what you're doing is a good thing because you're doing it for you and your family, so on and so forth. It's all men. It's us. So it's many deeper, different understandings of what Satan represents. But it goes back to a lot of different things. And people are going to be scared of it, and they have been made to be scared of it. And, it's movies out here, and it's just like a lot of common sense questions you got to ask yourself for these movies, to be allowed to be made by people that's supposed to be ordained by God. And then you have the worship and praise of Satan, satanic things all throughout the, the entertainment industry. You got to look at that. And you got to look at the, rich millionaire actors and musicians that thank Jesus for their success. And the whole time they're promoting Satan and promoting things that's against the Bible, but they're successful. And it's so many different things to look at and say, well, how is these people getting success and, seemingly being blessed by God. I mean, you have these rappers that have prayer meetings. I showed you guys the picture of the strippers praying before. You got to look at all this stuff. There's so many different things that people take out of religion and put it towards their personal self. And that's really what you're supposed to do when you understand. But Christians doing it all the time on social media, not supposed to be there, doing things they're not supposed to do, but they will argue you down that they are Christian and that they worship and follow the book, when we can clearly see they don't. People take the religion and take it personally and try to fit it to fit where they want it to fit or need it to fit personally. Jesus as my own personal Lord and Savior. This is what they're doing. And you got to understand how that breaks down. So it's the same, Jesus is Satan. Satan is Jesus. God, Satan, one and the same. Saul still goes back to you. Plain and simple. Anything that's going to be done evil in your life is done as a result of your own actions or the actions of someone else. For whatever reason, you put yourself in a certain position at any place, any point in time, and something bad happened, but it still was your actions or the actions of someone else. And it's crazy how, Christians take all of the esoteric information about the Bible and Saturn and everything else and just dismiss it. And we don't have this same stuff as it relates to the biblical stories. It's just stories. But you got to think about the wording of things. Chronos, crown, chrome, chronology, Chronos, god of time, god of Saturn. And you have Jesus with the crown of thorns, which we see is the sun rays, understanding what that means, but it's the crown. He was, crucified on Golgotha, which is the place of the skull. And all this corresponding to you still goes back. It goes back to here. And, you go to church or you go to temples, you go worship in the temple inside. Jesus says you have to go in. I am a part of you. You are God, so on and so forth. This is not a coincidence. It's giving you the same esoteric understanding. You just got to be able to connect the dots. And it's people who just really want to believe in this so bad because they put their hope in it and they put their hope in all of it. But then they don't follow the book. And it's like, okay, well, you really don't want this to be true, because if it is, you're going to hell because you don't live by the book. So, it's deep. It's a big esoteric part of us and religion that we got to connect the dots and understand, but not many people are going to be able to do it because of this division. But if you don't go look at what this stuff goes back to, you're going to forever be lost. You're going to be living in fear because it really takes you to, you got to take the time and go back and look and see what this stuff is really talking about, and don't be scared, and see how it goes back to ancient things. And it's one of the reasons why you have people thinking that Kemet is bad, it's evil, because we talk about it. I have people who all they do, I'm in a lot of groups, they post information against, ancient Egypt as if, it's what we worship, and, everything, it's about, the Ankh and, Osiris and Isis and all that. It's so much deeper than that. And as I said, we're not trading biblical prophets and gods for Egyptian ones. It's us doing the research and understanding where the stuff came from, and that even they didn't worship it in the sense that we call worship. And it's really obvious. It's one of the things I come across so many people that seem so sure and cocky and arrogant in their religion. And as a researcher, a person who does this for over 20 years, a person hasn't looked at anything. They're regurgitating what they heard in church or seen online. They did biased research where you go back and look at the people who put out the research. They're Christian or Christian sources. They didn't go and look because, like I said, there's no way you can go and look and still worship the book. There's no way you can read the book and still worship it, because, as I said, you get to a certain point, you're done. You understand. You start to get it, what it's talking about. And it just seemed so far-fetched. It's just crazy. It's hard to believe. The stories itself is hard to believe. But then just to believe the stupidity of the Hebrews throughout the Bible is just hard to believe that the people who are actually dealing with the real creator God is so stupid and so defiant, which is why you got to really look at that story. As I said, I am the Lord, your God. Who is it talking about? Because clearly I'm the Lord, your God. I'm not everybody else's God. I'm your God. And you should have no other gods before me, implying that there are other gods. But you're supposed to be the one who created everything. So why are you worried about any of this? Why is it a problem? Why would you be worried about them worshiping something that you created that not supposed to exist according to our preachers and what have you? So if there's other gods out there, who are these other gods, and why do you fear them? Why do you have a problem with them? What do they do? What are they doing? And then you got to look and just, it's a story, but just think about the biblical, the part of it, the common sense part of it, that if these people were worshiping whatever it is, it must be something real. But then you go back and you understand that, hey, it's talking about Saturn. It's talking about something that's real that existed. And then you got to look at it and say, hey, you guys, I don't want you to worship. This is what the God is saying to his people. And I broke down who his people is. I don't want you guys worshiping this stuff. Get away from it. No. I'm the Lord, your God. This is a different thing. And it's you understanding that now they're trying to get the people that's in the ancient world away from the worship of, what they call paganism, because everybody who wasn't doing the Christian thing was called a pagan, and away from the old worship, which is the real, not even really worship, just knowledge, real knowledge, and into the worship of men, because this is what's happening. You're worshiping men. You're worshiping prophets that never existed. You're worshiping Jesus that never existed. You're worshiping all this stuff that is no proof for, whereas in the ancient world, they have proof. This is real, natural, things. This is nature. And do away with that. Hellenization, religion, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, what have you. And it's men, Muhammad, worshiping the prophets, Sarah, Khadijah, all that stuff. And everything is put into man, and and it's esoterically giving you nature, but it's hiding it, and it's hiding aspects about yourself that you need to know. But going to get into this more deeply in upcoming videos. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and everybody who supported, make sure you take advantage of that sale. It's going to be done by tomorrow. Thanks for watching.